It feels like the writer was given a 3-minute chunk of this film labelled emotional complexity and characterisation. At that point you may as well just log into TikTok, put on a chain and pretend to choke the camera, like we get it! Disappointed, but not surprised. Why hello there, welcome back to my channel. My name's Tallulah if you did not know, and today I'm using a keep cup so I could pretend like I'm going somewhere. As you can tell by the title of this video, I'm doing my first Tallulah Netflix review. I wanted to start this series with Below Her Mouth, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. But if you're actually watching this, and if this has actually made it onto YouTube, then it is genuinely a miracle, because this is the third time that I'm sitting down to talk about this godforsaken film. And the reason it's taken me so many attempts to figure out how I want to talk about this film is because I kept changing my mind about it. I finally realised that I could not make a video completely praising or completely shitting on this film, so instead we're going to dive into all of my mixed feelings, the good, the bad, the sex scenes, the terrible acting. Thank you so much for clicking on this video, and if you're new around here then don't forget to hit subscribe to become a lovely. I think I've waffled enough, so let's dive into this beautiful nightmare of a film. Firstly, I'm going to summarise this film as quickly as I can. If you know the plot inside out like I do, then I'll put a timestamp on the screen and you can skip to the T. But if you're not super familiar with this film, then stick around so I can tell you what goes down. This film is basically a love story between two women. You've got Dallas, the butch lesbian roofer, and you've got Jasmine, the hyper femme, seemingly straight, engaged to a man, fashion executive. Dallas is working on a roofing project near Jasmine's house, so they kind of know each other's faces, and then one night they meet at a girl party in a gay club. The whole reason Jasmine winds up at this girl party is because her friend makes her go for a night out. It's just like, oh hey, let's go to this gay club. And the reason they're going out is because Jasmine's generic white man boyfriend, Ryle, is away on business. Long story short, Dallas spots Jasmine. Dallas is like, wow, you're fit. She pursues her. Jasmine is like, no. And Dallas is like, yes. Anyway, they end up making out in this club because Dallas does not take no for an answer. Jasmine is obviously pretty messed up over this whole situation because she thinks she's straight and she's engaged to a man, and now she's just made out with a really, really hot woman in a club. So initially Jasmine is resistant to this whole thing, but Dallas persuades her to go on a date. So then this situation spirals into what is a really intense affair, which seems initially just physical, but it also turns out to be emotional. But then, oh no, generic white man boyfriend Ryle comes back from his business trip early and he catches them going at it in the bath. Jasmine agrees to break up with Dallas even though it breaks her heart. They're all very sad. Dallas goes to a strip club. It's not a very happy trip to the strip club for Dallas. But being with Dallas, then losing her and returning to Ryle makes Jasmine realise that she can never really be happy with this man, and maybe she never really was. So basically, long story short, she ends up with Dallas. Happy ending, woo! As I said in the intro, this is my third time sitting down to talk about this film and try and figure out whether or not it is actually a good piece of Tallulah cinema. My argument in the first video I made about Below Her Mouth was that it's essentially a disaster. I said that it is just porn with a plot thrown at it. It's really stereotypical, generic, it doesn't really offer anything new, and the terrible plot is just kind of intersected with really, really long sex scenes, and that the whole thing isn't really very meaningful at all. Then I had a total change of heart, backtracked entirely, and filmed a second video where I talked about how this is actually an amazing piece of radical cinema. I led with the point that the entire creative team of Below Her Mouth were women, and that their specific aim for the film was to represent a lesbian relationship through the female gaze. And I argued that you couldn't really criticise this film for having too much sex in it, as loads of people do, because one of the main points of this film was to represent lesbian sex as directed by women, which is something that is pretty rare, and although this film isn't porn, it is an erotic film. So I was like, well, you can't criticise the film for having a thin plot and loads of sex if that is one of the things that the film was aiming to do. But having gone to both extremes of loving and hating this film, I've finally come to the slightly meh conclusion that this is a really disappointing case of unfulfilled potential. It's clear from interviews with the director April Mullen that she had really radical intentions for this film. The whole creative team of Below Her Mouth were aiming at something that hadn't been done before. They wanted to show two women falling in love, they wanted to show them having loads of sex in a way that was directed by women as opposed to dictated by demands of the male audience, as is often the case with like lesbian porn, and they wanted to work exclusively with women to create the project, and that by itself is really radical and unique and cool, but I can't take that by itself and praise it and just ignore the fact that so many aspects of this film are just really disappointing. So what I'm going to do is go through the main kind of pitfalls of this film, the things that could have been, and talk about where I would have liked to see something different. Firstly, I want to talk about the plot and the balance between sex scenes and narrative. From the reviews reviews I've read, I think the most common criticism of this film is the fact that there is too much sex relative to narrative or like character development or like ordinary filmic goings on. The reason I don't agree with this criticism is because this film would not have been saved just by cutting the number of sex scenes. And also, if you look at interviews with the director, April Mullen, she said that one of the purposes of this film was to like celebrate the female orgasm and to show that between two women as directed by women. So I'm not going to come for that because that was one of the main choices about the film. That's something that they wanted to do. But my issue with the kind of narrative sex scene relationship is what they did with the little time they had left outside the sex scenes, which was not very much. This is a massive area of unfulfilled potential for this film, and I'm not saying there was a bunch of time to play with outside of the sex scenes, but it feels like the screenplay was just kind of lazy and that the team was just like, oh well, okay, if they just talk a bit vaguely about their childhoods over a montage of them on a boat, then like, that's an emotional connection, right? I don't think the connection between Dallas and Jasmine is unbelievable by any means. Like, they have loads of sexual chemistry and they do have some cute moments, but I just feel like they could have done more. I would have liked to see them in a wider range of situations even. I would have liked to see them have some kind of stupid conflict. I would have liked to see them do anything that fell outside this kind of like rigorously stuck to stereotype of the fantasy whirlwind romance that starts as this physical connection and then they become emotionally connected, but sort of inexplicably. It's hard to pin down exactly what more I wanted from this film because obviously I've only seen it as it is. But speaking in very general terms, there just aren't enough points in this film where either character break out of their stereotypes. Talking of stereotypes, let's talk about the characterization, or lack thereof. The frustrating thing about Dallas and Jasmine is that it's so obvious that the women who created these characters had something more complex in mind. There are little glimpses that we can cling on to in the screenplay that suggest kind of more emotional complexity and a backstory and something that would have been really interesting to explore and something which would have kind of chipped away at this veneer of like, oh, a butch woman and a femme woman, she has a manly job, she's a roofer, she has a lady job, she's in fashion. It's just really so stereotypical, and that's not to say that these kind of Woolawood don't exist because they do, but I just feel like in a movie that was trying to represent women through the female gaze, they could have picked less archetypal character tropes. There's a scene I mentioned earlier where there's kind of a montage of them going on a date overlaid with a voiceover of them talking about their childhoods and their lives, essentially. It feels like the writer was given a 3-minute chunk of this film labelled emotional complexity and characterization, in which they had to go, well, you know, Jasmine had to repress her sexuality for most of her life, and then Dallas had a complicated relationship with gender, having been labelled a tomboy as a child. Oh, time's up. And that's just a really frustrating feeling watching this film because I want to be invested and I want to feel like they are well-rounded characters and I want to have faith in the fact that the women who made this film had a vision and they executed it, but I just really don't feel like they did. The sad truth of the matter, as much as I don't want to accept it, is that Below Her Mouth is pretty badly written and it's pretty badly acted. And it breaks my heart to say this, but Erika Linder is not a good actress. Erika Linder is such a beautiful human being. She is so stunning and I love her with all my heart. But there is one moment in this film that literally feels like it was lifted out of a fuck girl TikTok. Like, it's so terrible. There's this one moment where they barely know each other. It's when they're in the nightclub and Erika Linder is like, I have no stamina for emotional intimacy. At that point, you may as well just log into TikTok, put on a chain and pretend to choke the camera. Like, we get it. This was Erika Linder's first film because she's mainly a model and she'd done music videos in the past, but she'd never done something of this scale. And when you just purely look at the acting of Erika Linder versus Natalie Krill, who plays Jasmine, you can tell that Natalie Krill is just a better and more experienced actor. But it really makes me wonder, why did they hire someone completely inexperienced? Why? They hired her because she looks like a hot butch roofer. And that's the thing, the actors are really hot, they have really good chemistry, and I can't really say anything bad about the sex scenes. I understand how on the surface level, if you'd just seen this film and didn't know anything about its aims or about the team, you would easily think that this was just another film made by men to like fetishize lesbians. We've seen that happen before, like with Blue is the Warmest Colour, which has a really bad reputation because it was directed by a man and just the working conditions were really nasty, and despite having loads of explicit sex scenes in, it really doesn't seem like they created a safe atmosphere to record that. But obviously this film isn't like that. It was created by women and they really took advantage of all that sex scene time they set aside to show a wide range of acts. But having seen Below Her Mouth 3 times and thought about it way too much, I've kind of come to the conclusion that they should have gone one of two ways. rather than make the film in the way that they did. Either the director should have committed to making something that was self-described as porn, she should have worked with sex workers instead of traditional actors, and she should have created something through the male gaze for women, because that is something that's really lacking in mainstream porn. Or she should have committed to making a feature film but cut down on the sex scenes a bit and tried to do something more complicated and revolutionary in terms of the plot and the characterization. I know I said before that I don't want to criticize this film just for having loads of sex scenes in it, but I do think they made it difficult for themselves to do something really good with the narrative by kind of committing to that ratio. I also don't understand why they didn't just make the film longer. I know it's an indie film and they probably had budgeting issues and they shot the whole thing within 3 weeks, which is impressive because it's high quality, like cinematically. Dumb queer alert. But if we put like hypothetical budgeting and time constraint issues to the side, they clearly could have added another half an hour to this film. It only comes in at about an hour and a half, and so many films these days are 2 hours or longer. They could have just made this like a fat feature film and spent time exploring their relationship after she broke up with Ryle, or doing flashbacks to their younger selves and maybe their romantic histories. They could have done something really cool, like exploring the way Jasmine had to repress her sexuality, or the way Dallas navigated her youth knowing that she was a lesbian. They could have just done so much and they just didn't. I don't think this film is all bad, and I think they had really good intentions, but it's frustrating that the way it is, it's kind of just sexy trash. It's a trashy film that you watch because they're hot and you can get invested, and honestly sometimes as a willower you just take what you're given because there's so little representation that you're just like, okay, I'll take this I guess. I'm aware that the lighting has gone super janky, so I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm glad I finally word vomited everything I feel about this film, and I think I've finally decided where I stand on it, and where I stand is disappointed but not surprised. I'd be really interested to hear what you think about this film, if you love it, if you hate it, or if you're kind of somewhere in the middle like me. If you want me to review more willower films, then let me know by liking this video, and you can comment down below any ones you'd like me to talk about. I have a couple of ideas, but I'd be interested to see if there are any particular requests. Don't forget to subscribe to become a lovely, and follow me on my Instagram for more of my face. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. I'm sending you all lots of love, and I will see you very soon. Bye!